Both Prince and Michael Jackson were always in friendly competition with each other. Both amazing artists, both legendary, and both very successful. But in the 80s, who really deserved the golden microphone? Well, today we're going to go round for round in our first versus video to find out who really holds the 80s King of Pop crown. With Michael Jackson squaring up versus Prince. But before we get going, subscribers wanted to know who was the voice behind all of this awesome content. It was so un-80s of me to not introduce myself in rap form. Well, I go by the name of 80, and I thank you guys for watching me. And forget that. Cue that intro. First and foremost, if you haven't already, don't forget to smash that like button, leave a rad comment, and show some love, and subscribe. So to start, let's look at some of their #1 hits from the 80s. Prince released a total of 9 albums through the 80s, but from all those albums, only 4 songs reached #1 on the Billboard single charts. The song Bat Dance from the Batman soundtrack in 1989, and the song Kiss from the Parade album. Prince also had 2 songs chart #1 from his most successful album, Purple Rain, with Let's Go Crazy and When Doves Cry. Michael Jackson only released 2 albums in the 80s, both with multiple #1 charting and record-breaking singles. From his 82 release Thriller, the 2 singles charting #1 on the billboards were Billie Jean and Beat It. Then 5 years later, Mike would release 5 singles from his Bad album that would break records for time spent on the charts and holding down the #1 spot. Those 5 record-breaking singles were Bad, I Just Can't Stop Loving You, Man in the Mirror, Dirty Diana, and The Way You Make Me Feel. Both artists would have many more hits, but this first round is for #1 hits and easy by way of sheer numbers. Prince with 4 #1 hits, MJ with 7. Point MJ. One of the things that helps a star's notoriety is seeing that star out in public with another famous celebrity. Next round, we're going to look into relationships. Although both artists focused and spent time on their craft, still some time was spent with other celebrities out together having fun. Michael didn't date often, but would be seen out with a few young stars in the 80s while he was still young himself. Mike would be seen out a few times with Tatum O'Neal after building up a friendship first, then dating shortly. They would remain friends after that short romance. He was also seen out with Brooke Shields, who to this day has nothing but nice things to say about her time spent with MJ. It's also little known that Mike and Whitney Houston had a little brief fling in the mid-80s that didn't last very long. Many of Michael's family members still say Michael was heartbroken when that didn't work out. I mean, he really thought that would be the woman he would marry. He also went out with Madonna a few times before they fell out of each other's graces. Prince also dated Madonna for a short time, but what can we say? I guess we're not the only ones that love Madonna. 2 of Prince's known relationships were with 2 separate women who you could argue looked very similar. Prince definitely had a type. Both worked with him professionally, with one having replaced the other. First, Prince dated Vanity, also known as Denise Matthews, after meeting her at a party at Rick James' house. She would become the lead singer of the group, Vanity 6, backed by Prince. Then Prince dated Apollonia Katona, who would replace Vanity in the movie Purple Rain and would go on to work with Prince as part of the Revolution. But Prince didn't just keep his love within the music industry. Oh nah, not the man of love. Prince quietly dated Sherilyn Fenn before she would star in the first TV series Twin Peaks. And who could forget all the attention that Prince and Kim Basinger got on their nights out together. Both men dated notable women, but come on, let's be honest here. When you think of women and other celebrities, do you think Michael Jackson or Prince? Easy. Point Prince. Next round is no real competition between the 2 men in record sales. Both were already way up in the millions earned from record sales before passing away. Prince had already sold a total of over 32 million copies from his combined music catalog of his albums in the 80s. Now, even though MJ only released 2 albums in the 80s, his record sales surpassed Prince substantially. Just one of his albums collected almost double in sales of what Prince did. Mike has a total of over 100 million copies sold between both Bad and the most selling album of all time, Thriller, which, by the way, was on the Billboard chart for 392 consecutive weeks and has recently returned on the chart. No more talk needed. Point Michael Jackson. The next round is much more debatable. Which artist achieved the most fame? Again, remember, we're only covering the time period of the 80s. This one was not easy if you try to recapture the feel of the 80s by researching many old articles. Let's start with Prince. Prince's first bit of attention or fame would come from his fashion sense, or lack thereof, whatever your opinion on that is. He would constantly push the boundaries of acceptable fashion for men while being comfortable in his own skin. His music fame and recognition would begin to rise in the mid-80s after the success of his albums Parade and the greatly received album 1999. His next venture would take Prince's fame worldwide in the music industry and on the silver screen. Purple Rain would win a Grammy for Best Rock Vocal Performance and an Oscar for Best Original Song Score for the movie of the same title. Prince would be known, and somewhat famously so, for womanizing with the many different public relationships he held. But honestly, I think Prince would just fall in love hard and fast, and like his musical mind, he would always stay looking for what could be next. By the time 1980 hit, Michael Jackson had already achieved fame and success as the lead singer in his all-brother group Jackson 5. As a matter of fact, it was a family full of fame. From his father Joe Jackson producing his own album to his little sister, she would become a megastar in her own right. Mike would go on to be universally loved after he dropped Thriller, especially with all the attention the video received, which was basically a movie. Mike's fame would grow even more after becoming the first artist with a major endorsement when Pepsi signed him to appear in commercials, until one went horribly wrong when a spark from the Pyrotex hit MJ's head, burning his hair, scalp, and face. All in all, looked like Pepsi helped foot the bill that would finance the Neverland Ranch, his famous estate. MJ would also star in the movie, although he didn't write it like his counterpart did for Purple Rain. Moonwalker would be a film released in 1988 that expressed the influence of fandom and innocence through a collection of short films about Michael Jackson, and also had a section dedicated to his movie-like music videos. Mike would also team up with Disney for the famous adventure theater ride and short film called Captain EO, that stood from 1986 to 1998 and returned shortly from 2010 to 2014 at Disneyland in California. Mike's second album in the 80s, Bad, blew his fame to an all-time high, shattering records for the second highest selling album tour behind Pink Floyd's Momentary Lapse of Reason tour. The Bad tour included 123 concerts to 4.4 million fans across 15 countries. So naturally, when most in the world think 80s music, the mind goes to Mike. Point for fame? Mike. Who had a greater influence on the world during the 80s? This one is definitely the most arguable round. Let's start with Mr. Jackson and his musical influence. There are plenty of artists today like Usher, Bruno Mars, and Chris Brown that have admitted that MJ was a huge influence in their musical career. But in the 80s, you had to look no further than the Jackson household. Mike would definitely influence the career burst and stardom for Janet Jackson. Her most successful album, Rhythm Nation 1814, has MJ's influence all over it, down to some of the dance moves in the video. But it wasn't just Janet. Other artists and labels began to invest heavily in the music videos as promotion after seeing Mike's success. It didn't stop there with his musical industry influence. Because of MJ's Pepsi deal, more black artists began to get recognition and endorsement deals. Mike would also influence a change in 80s fashion. Don't believe me? Just look at any of Mike's 80s videos and then take a look at the world's fashion sense shortly after. For example, that red leather jacket and the effect that it had on the leather industry and the world, and even other stars following the Beat It video. On the other hand, Prince would push the envelope with his fashion sense, but it was definitely not influential to the world. Instead, that would be one of the things people would use to take jabs at him. But his influence was definitely felt in the 80s in many other ways. Prince wrote all of his music, but he also wrote for a lot of other artists in the 80s, like the Bangles, Sheila E., Vanity 6, Patti LaBelle, Madonna, Kenny Rogers, and Shaka Khan, to name some. And these are the songs that we know of. Prince would use many pseudonyms when ghostwriting, not wanting any real credit. So Prince influenced the music industry with not only his own hits, but also penning many Billboard charting singles for some of the aforementioned artists. He also helped influence the direction that the popular producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis would take in the late 80s and early 90s with the New Jack Swing, after they worked with Prince for the better part of the decade. Prince discovered Denise Matthews' talent. He discovered and molded Apollonia, as he also did with Sheila E., from the lyrics he wrote for them down to the way they would dress and act on stage, all influenced by Prince. Both Prince and MJ made music in the 80s that many artists emulate even today. But Prince's 1999 album, argued the most influential album of the 80s, according to a 2006 Rolling Stone article, changed pop music and what it would sound like for that era. Even Michael Jackson changed up his sound in the 80s following Prince's success. Bad would have that more fast-paced, erratic pop sound like the 1999 album. So an influencer influenced by an influencer. Round and point, Prince. Next round, talent. Who had the most of it? We know both artists had great writing talent, with Mike writing over 7 #1 hits in the 80s, and many others that didn't chart #1. And Prince had few #1 hits in the 80s, but also as discussed, he wrote many hits for other artists that did claim #1 on the Billboard. No real separation here. But this is where we do start to see separation in their talents. In my opinion, Michael Jackson definitely has the better vocalist voice, even though years of experience and polishing this craft through childhood stardom helped him out a lot. Everyone who follows music knows MJ's dancing talent was non-comparable. Mike also had a little bit of acting chops. And I do mean a little, as we talked about earlier in his 2 80s films, Captain EO and Moonwalker, or the many music videos that he filmed in the 80s playing different roles. In all of the videos created, Mike truly showed his visual talent for video making, capturing his lyrical message and connecting with his audience with actors and action. One of the talents of Prince that appears to be lacking in MJ was having the eye to find other talent. Prince's power of his pen didn't stop at music. He was just as talented on the silver screen with the success from the screenplay of Purple Rain. Prince also had the acting skills to rise over Mike's own acting. One of the things that somehow gets a little overlooked in Prince's talent is his ability to play almost any instrument. Prince would compose all music used in all his albums. When it came to instruments, you could definitely see that this man was a musical savant, teaching himself to play the drums, the piano, and the guitar at ages 14, age 7, and 13 respectively. Prince has had some of the greatest guitar riffs of the 80s. And all this from a self-taught musician with the talent to learn quickly. He also had a talent for spotting the right look or that it factor outfit, as he would personally style and dress most of his band members, and talent he discovered. So I guess he had some fashion sense, just not for men anyways. Both artists again were flown with talent, much more than any other artist in their field at the time. But our opinion, Prince reigned supreme with talent. Point Prince. Before the deciding round, the question of the video is, if you had to choose any of the artists over the other and could only listen to that artist's music for the rest of your life, who would it be? Go ahead and leave a like if you enjoyed the video so far. It really helps our video with the YouTube algorithms and getting suggested. Don't forget to leave your answers in the comment section. For the final and deciding round, who was the most entertaining throughout the 80s? So who can remember that night on stage, May 16th, 1983 at the Motown 25 concert in Pasadena, California? I'm so envious of anyone who was there and got to feel that energy live and see Michael do the moonwalk for the very first time on national TV. Mike would put on a show when he would perform. For anyone who ever seen him live or even watched footage of a concert, you truly understand why his worldwide Bad album tour earned him so much money. Again, he literally left it all out there on stage. Paying fans would leave satisfied and well entertained.
But wait, there's more!
All the money spent in his video on the production and actors would be a small fee for the amount of entertainment value it brought, in which turn made Mike profit. Videos like Bad and Beat It are always my very first visual video associations with MJ when I think of entertaining music videos. Mike would also have some collaborations with other artists like Paul McCartney that sparked interest and brought chart-topping music. But just as entertaining would be some of the interest the world would get in hearing about some of the unreleased collaborations with such artists like Stevie Wonder, LL Cool J, and Freddie Mercury, to name a short few of the 10+ unreleased artist collaborations with Mike in the 80s. Then just look at the Neverland Ranch. I mean, come on, anyone who has a theme park in their home has to be all about being and doing the entertaining. On top of that, the 80s would really be a period of the public wanting to dig more and more into the personal life of Michael, sparking him to make the song Leave Me Alone. Prince, on the other hand, would guard his personal life with his life. I think this may be one of the things that started some of the so-called jealousy that Mike had for Prince. But fans know, when you love or support someone in the public eye, then we expect to get personal insights as well. And blocking that off won't help you gain fans. But you don't win a Grammy and Oscar if you're not somewhat entertaining. The storyline and characters created for Purple Rain was very entertaining, and all the credit of course has to go to the writer Prince. Then in the movie, and even some of Prince's own fashion and wardrobe, you could even say was maybe entertaining? I mean, who can forget, after only seeing them once, the famous chapless pants? I gotta keep this channel PG. But really though, even though Prince was my guy, I just can't co-sign that one. Prince was also honestly a very entertaining live performer. Just something about the way he would play a guitar or piano on stage that would capture, almost hypnotizing his fans. The way he would walk on stage, you just knew you were about to see something special, and he never disappointed. But at the end of the day, only one of these men had a major endorsement in the 80s, mainly because of his entertaining appeal. Round, point, and pop middle of the 80s goes to the most famous and most selling of the two, the king of pop, Michael Jackson. So did you agree? Leave it in the comments. If you want to see some more videos about music from the 80s, check out our video about Big Daddy Kane here, or check out our latest videos here. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.